Regina, which is on Treaty 4 territory. And I'm really pleased that so many of you have joined us today. And Corey talked a little bit about my history and why, a little bit about my experience, what sort of leads into why I personally care about resumes, which is maybe kind of a strange thing to care about. So full disclosure, before we get started, I'm not a relations professional. I'm a professional agrologist. I have a degree in agriculture, just like all of you. But over the years, I've had the opportunity to look at a lot of resumes, both as a participating in a hiring process at Farm Credit Canada, and then also with the work that I have done with the admissions and registration committee of the SIA. So, what I will share with you today is largely based on my experience and my perspective. But in the preparation of the workshop, I did consult with some HR professionals. I'll talk about them later, and hiring managers at a number of employers. So, I tried to round out my experience with the experience of others. So, let's get started. So, it's for me, it's about being impactful, and that's why we actually care about resumes and cover letters because um, in my experience as a hiring manager, sometimes there was 10 or 50 or more application that I'd receive. And right now the job market is quite good for ag professionals in the market and in the agriculture industry in general. But I still think there's really good reasons to be thoughtful and purposeful about the construction of your resume. Um, in my 30 some years of working in the ag industry, there were a lot of changes in the workplace. But the resume still is the primary and the first way of presenting yourself when you're applying for a job. That really hasn't changed over my career, my 30 years. So today we're going to talk about how to make that professional first impression and how to differentiate yourself from other candidates, because really the objective is move forward in the competition. During our time together today, I'm not going to talk for the whole hour, guaranteed, but I'll be asking for your feedback. And so I'd like you to use the chat function and I'll be able to see it. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat as was instructed at the beginning, and Corey will help me manage that and interrupt me when needed. So first thing you should do when you are considering applying for a job is do your research. So you need to do your research on your prospective employer and the position so you can tailor your resume to the job that you're applying for. You want to showcase your skills and your experience and see, kind of draw that line of sight how they're transferable to those listed in the job posting. So you can do that by looking at the organization's website, reading their annual report, talking to people that work there. Maybe you can talk to somebody that can help you talk to the hiring manager in advance. Because when you get that interview, knowing something about the organization and having more insight into the role, being able to ask good questions and really demonstrate your keenness and your desire to be prepared, those are always good traits of employees and potential employees. And when I had the opportunity to review resumes and then talk to people in interviews, people that had done their research and literally done their homework, they stood out from others, and that's a good thing. So, first of all, we're going to talk about resumes. If I can get my page to turn. Mhm. So this is kind of the start of the interactive thing, and so I've to illustrate a couple points that I want to make. I've mocked up an outline of maybe what my resume could look like, and I'm going to show you three versions of it, and then I'm going to ask you what you think. So we're going to look at three different versions of the resume, and then I want you to put some of your thoughts, what stands out for you in the chat. So here is version number one. I'll just leave that up there for a couple minutes for you to digest. Okay, version number two. And then version number three. Okay. So, as I mentioned, this is the interactive part. What did you notice? So, maybe if you can put in the chat some things that you noticed when you were looking at those resumes. Mm, And I'll just give you a chance to do that. So, I'm going to go back. Version number one, number two, number three. Okay, Shannon writes version two felt very thrown together, not well thought out, lack of attention to detail. Good. That was pretty much my point, Shannon. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else people noticed? Mhm. So this was version two. Yeah. The resume is not elaborate. Yeah, for sure. And also for the point of this illustration, this wasn't intended to be the full resume, just kind of a little bit of a snapshot. Version three makes me feel like I'm back in school. Okay, that's interesting. This is version three. Okay. Version one was easy to see the information that you were looking for. Yeah. So I won't spend a lot of time on this because we're going to get into some nuts and bolts on it. But you know, I don't want to leave you with the impression that it's all about the cosmetics, colors and fonts and all that kind of stuff. And but I do want to say how a resume looks, plus the content, of course, is the full package that you're presenting to an organization. That at the start, all they know is what you put in your resume, all that they can see. And so, I'm going to reiterate that again. It is a little bit of cosmetics, how things looks, and for sure it's the content too. And both of those things combined are making the impression. So just be thoughtful about the impression that you want to make. So really, as I mentioned before, a resume is all about you. So it's an opportunity to present your experience, your education, your skills in relation to the role that you're applying for. And then it's an opportunity to differentiate yourself because you're applying for a job amongst a pool of other people that are applying for a job. And so if you're able to present your experience, education, and skills that look that the employer can see sort of match up with what they're looking for, and you can differentiate yourself, you that should lead you to move forward to the next stage of the job application process. So usually some sort of pre-screening, maybe there's some testing, then an interview. And you're going to hear me say this a few times, so I'll just tell you that to start with. Look for ways to tailor your resume each time for the purpose that you're using it for. So a resume shouldn't be a one size fits for all jobs and all purposes. And that also, helps sort of differentiate yourself. So here's some ideas for section headings for resumes. And there's a variety of ways to do this. There's not just, the one right way. But here's some basic things that you're going to see in most resumes. Of course, your name, your contact information, your phone number, email, LinkedIn profile, maybe. And just one thing I want to say about your email address. If your email address is, mine, lindsay.folk@sastel.net, that's fairly ordinary. But if your email address is something like I like skating @gmail.com, you might want to think about making it changing your email address to be something a little bit more professional. Education is probably the next thing that you would see on a resume. And in a minute, I'm going to talk about specifically how to present your degree. But most roles have educational requirements. And so you need to be clear about what your credentials are, what certifications you have, what the dates that you achieve, those types of things. A question and a wonder that I have sometimes when I see resumes, whether it's necessary to include high school. And in this is my opinion, but I don't think it's necessary to include your high school, or the year that you graduated from high school, particularly if you've graduated from university. It's assumed that you graduated from high school if you have a university education. And especially if it was a long time ago, then that's kind of like ancient history. But But if you're a recent university grad and you had some significant achievements in high school, maybe some awards or those types of things, maybe that's worthy to include. The next thing that you see on most resumes is work experience. And so I think it's super important, put it in chronological order, starting with your most current or your most recent job. Include start and end dates and have enough description of what your role was titled and the types of things and responsibilities that you had so that an employer understands your scope of work. I mean, it shouldn't be the whole detailed job description because that's going to be too much and it's going to make your resume too long. But your employer needs to say, okay, they did this and I can kind of see how that links to what I'm looking for. In terms of how far back you go, it sort of depends on your work history. If you're me and I've worked for 35, 34 years, then, I am on my resume would have included my last couple jobs with a little bit more detail. And then prior to that, I just kind of listed the roles. But if I was doing my resume of my 28-year-old self, I'm probably going to include all of the jobs that I had since I graduated. So just talking about the structure a little bit, continuing on that. Include specialized skills, specialized knowledge. So, and this is another opportunity. Take a look at what the job posting is asking for and make sure you indicate the skills or knowledge that's required or relevant to that job. Um, my opinion too is that listing that I'm proficient in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, I think those are kind of ordinary things that most university graduates would have those experiences. But if there's a little bit specialized knowledge or the job is particularly requires like a expert level of Excel, absolutely include that. Volunteer and leadership experiences and professional membership. So for sure on your resume, you're going to say you're a professional agrologist, you're an articling agrologist. Um, and think about what sets you apart from others. You're going to hear me say that a few times too. And early in your career, when you have limited work experience, sometimes volunteerism is another way to highlight your skills. So, if I was part of a university athletic team, if I led, or participated in a club or a volunteer activity, if there was an initiative like a food bank drive, that I took a leadership role, those types of things include in your resume because it kind of adds to your dimension for sure. Um, References, and I'll tell you this is my opinion. I don't think it's necessary to include and list all your references on a resume. When I'm applying for a job, there gets to be a point in the process where the hiring manager is going to ask for references. And at that point in time, I should have my list of references ready and available to share. I don't I don't think you need to have them as part of your reference and or pardon me, as part of your resume. And if you have them in your resume, that's fine too. Just make sure every time you give a list of references to someone that you've told those people or you've asked them, probably is the more correct thing to do. You've asked those people if they would be references for you and make sure that their contact information is up to date. Because if I have your list of references and I go to call them and the email address is wrong and the number's wrong, I'm probably going to be less excited about phoning your references. Okay. So now we're going to talk about specifically representing your education and your credentials. And so in our duty on the SIA Admissions and Registration Committee, we receive resumes as part of the application processes. And we see a lot of different ways that people represent their ag degree. Okay. And so I'm going to show you the variety of ways that we've seen these on actual resumes that have been submitted to our committee. And then we're going to talk about which is actually the right way to do it. So I'm going to leave this up here. And so using agronomy as an example, here's what we've seen on resumes that have been submitted to our admissions and registration committee. So we've got Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, major agronomy, BSA agronomy degree, just agronomy degree, Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, a 4-year degree in agronomy, Bachelor of Science in Agronomy, College of Agriculture and Bioresources dash agronomy, Bachelor of Agronomy. So, of all of these different illustrations, there's really only one right way to do it. And if you had an agronomy degree from the University of Saskatchewan, this is how you should represent it on your resume. And if you have received your degree with distinction or with great distinction, you should probably put that on your resume too, because that's an achievement that not everyone has for sure. Yeah. And so, if you're all curious about how your degree should be represented, actually, you could go look at your degree. Like, take that thing off the wall, take a look at how it reads. That's exactly how you should put it on your resume. And then college on the college website, and this is from 22-23, they will have updated it for sure, is that, majors and minors change over the years. And if you're wanting to know how it's represented or how it's indicated currently, there's a link to take you to the U of S website. So why does this matter? And I think it goes back to my earlier point about attention to detail and making sure things are as correct as they can be. But it's also critical that you not misrepresent what your credentials are. Um, Employers hire you on the basis of meeting certain specific requirements. And one of those, for all of the people on this call, is that you have a certain level of education. And so, and most employers, if that's a requirement for hiring you, they will, at the time that you are hired, ask for a copy of your degree. So, at some point in time, I'm going to say I have an agriculture degree, and then I have to prove I have an agriculture degree. So, and it's super important that you not misrepresent, what your credentials are in any manner. And I'll kind of illustrate something that we saw a long time back, is that, lots of us don't start off in the College of Agriculture. I didn't. I started off in a different college at a different university. And so if I was going to represent that, I could include that on my resume, that I took 1 year of general studies at the University of Calgary, but I chose not to. Not It's not misrepresenting, because actually I chose to indicate what my achievement was, which was actually my degree in agriculture. So, and if you took 1 year of arts, if you want to put that on your resume, fine, but just indicate that, not that you have a Bachelor of Arts, not that you were working towards a Bachelor of Arts, just that for one of those years you were in the College of Arts and not in the College of Agriculture. Um, if your education is from outside of Canada, you may need to be specific and a little bit more descriptive to help your employer understand what your education is. And if you've had your education and credentials assessed from an organization such as World Education Services, it's helpful to indicate that too, because that's documentation that you can provide to your prospective employer that sort of says, "Yep, what I have in my country is the equivalent of a 4-year agriculture degree in this country." Okay. So, few simple tips, really super simple. Number one, make sure it's up to date. Every time you share your resume, make sure it's up to date, and that your current role or your most recent experience is always listed first. Make it simple and easy to read. And so this kind of goes back to when I was showing those three different kinds of resumes. So use a professional font. Not a super fancy scripty font. Don't use multiple fonts. Keep the use of line spacing simple and consistent. Add bold or italics or a different color for emphasis and readability, if that helps. And 1 or 2 pages is all it should be. More is not better. If you're the hiring manager and you have 50 resumes and everybody makes them 5 pages long, that's a lot to read. I think it's an example that somebody didn't take the time to make it as relevant as possible, which goes to my next point, which is include only relevant information and put that first. Use active language. So think about action verbs. Prepare, and I'm kind of in the area of work experience and describing my job. I prepared materials for canola yield trials. I conducted field scouting. I increased sales. I coached peers. I analyzed results and recommended action plans. Those are active language verbs that are help you be concise in what you did. And something that I generally did in my resumes for the job that I had currently, I would say I was analyzing, and for the job that I had in prior roles, I would say analyzed. And that just helped emphasize the point that this is the job I have now. And these are the jobs that I've had prior to that. Include numbers to demonstrate impact if that's possible. And not all of us are in jobs where those kind of facts are easily constructed. But if you are, try and include that because that demonstrates impact. Don't use abbreviations or acronyms that people don't understand. You know, um, GPS might be an example of most people know what GPS is, but there's all sorts of acronyms that you're going to use every day in your work life to talk quickly to your peers. But in a resume, don't spell it out at least the first time that you use it because not everybody knows what some of these things stand for. And then, again, I'm telling you, consider the role you're applying for and include relevant experience. And really think about how you can tailor that resume to show the experience to the role. The last thing that I want to say about resumes before we move on or the last thing I want to say, I guess, as part of this is think about the file name that you give your resume. If I submit my resume to you and it's called Lindsay's Resume 2019, that's likely a sign that it's not, that I couldn't be bothered to update it. So just a little tip there. Lastly, when you've done all your work and you've thought about your words, proofread it, edit, proofread it, edit, do that again. Typos, grammar mistakes, inconsistency, weird formatting, that doesn't demonstrate professionalism and attention to detail. And professionalism and attention to detail are needed in most roles that all of us are going to apply for. So, maybe ask somebody else to take a look at your resume and ask for their feedback and ask them to be critical, not mean, but critical and constructive. And that will just help you have a really, really good product. Because again, this is your opportunity to make a professional first impression. So, briefly, we're going to talk about cover letters. So, a cover letter is an opportunity to add some personality and connect your qualifications and experience to the position. And it's to make it unique because you don't it's less about a particular format or a template, and it also is your opportunity to demonstrate some knowledge of the organization and why you're applying for this job, why working in this job for this organization is interesting to you. And you don't need to repeat everything in the resume. The employer is going to read the resume, but you could highlight a few key experiences that you think are most relevant. Some employers have online systems to receive resumes, so a cover letter may be less important because they're asking you to, sort of put information in a form as part of that process. But having a cover letter is always, that's a good idea because you can make it a little bit more personal. So let's talk about bringing it all together. Sorry, we'll go back up. As I mentioned earlier, I talked to a few ag employers as part of my preparation for this webinar, and their processes for recruiting and receiving job applications vary, for sure. And some are using technology in their HR processes, and some of them aren't. But the basic process is the same. Applicants submit a resume, their application, the resume, the cover letter. Someone in the organization reviews the application and generally screens it against some sort of set criteria, whether that's education, experience, skills, knowledge. And then someone in the organization determines who will advance further for an interview or perhaps testing. There are some organizations that use what's called an applicant tracking software. And so that's a system that may scan information in your resume for keywords. None of the organizations that I talk to use that type of technology, but I noticed on the USask site that the university estimates about a third of the employers that post jobs on USask Career Link site do. But regardless of what they're using to assess your resume, whether it's some sort of searching for keywords, electronic brain, or if it's a real life person reading your resume, the objective is to get past that first step. So your task is to present a professional, factual resume that relates your skills and experience to the job that you're applying for and sets yourself apart from others. It's pretty simple. So, yet again, we're going to do something interactive. So, this is a absolutely made up resume that I pulled a couple job descriptions from a poster that was shared with me from the Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency, and also from a job posting I found for an ag retailer. So not this isn't somebody's specific resume. I just made this up based on a couple things I pulled together. So in the chat, and keep in mind, this is just a small excerpt of their resume. Of course, they'd have more stuff and below, but what if this was a friend, what kind of feedback or what kind of suggestions would you give them some opportunities to make their resume more impactful? So if you want to put your thoughts in the chat, that'd be great. What would you tell your friend? Okay, unfortunately, I don't know any of you. Otherwise I would pick on somebody. Maybe I'll pick on Corey to type something in the chat. Write in full sentences. Okay, thank you. Remove high school experience. Totally agree. Yeah. Capital letters and format is not the same on both experiences. Absolutely. Yep. Okay. I'll throw out a couple other things. I wouldn't use current for my role as appraisal agrologist. I would say I would indicate what I had when I started the job. So, assuming I went from I was in school last year and this is just a job that I started in May, I would write May. Uh, sorry, I've messed up my years. Um, Assuming I started this after my summer student job, I would write September 2023 dash to current or dash present to indicate that this is the job that I had currently. Format to make the heading stand out, spelling and grammar. Yeah, for sure, Kelly. I have a couple other things that I purposely put in there. One is in the degree, so maybe somebody could kind of comment on that. Mm. Anybody notice anything about how this person has presented their degree? Okay, desperate to have somebody tell me what's going on with their degree, so please. Mm. Okay, in the interest of moving on, um, yeah, yeah, thank you, Valentina. It is the degree is um like it is a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture from the College of Agriculture. And so, again, go back, look at what your degree says, put that in exact same words on your resume. Yeah. And the other thing I would probably counsel them is not everyone knows what SAMA is. And so I would write Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency for absolute total clarity. Yeah. Okay. And the other thing I might think about the language, and I think maybe one of you guys commented about, oh, you talked about it being in full sentences. I might think of more interesting language than assist, collect, and maybe sort of think about what kind of impact. And some rules it's easier to do that than others for sure. Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about resources, and there's tons of resources available. So these are, I put some screenshots here of what's available on the University of Saskatchewan website. They have resume and cover letter guides, list of action verbs. We talked about that. They also offer a one-on-one service called Resume Talks to to give advice and feedback on your resume and cover letter. And it's a free service available to all newly admitted current students and alumni of the University of Saskatchewan. So more information is available on their website. There's lots of free templates online for resumes. If you go to Microsoft.com, you can find, quite a few different formats of templates. So a little bit of Googling can actually lead you, give you really, really good results. And so that would be the link to office.com, resumes and cover letters. And then, as I mentioned before, think about the file name of the attachments that you are sending. So before we go to questions, I just want to thank those that provided their insights and experiences to help me prepare for this presentation. And that's Ashley Langlois at Farm Credit Canada, Cassandra Morari at the REC, James Deck at Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency, Cassandra Viau at Saskatchewan Public Service Commission, which manages the hiring for the provincial government. And I do want to thank Valerie, Shannon, and Annette, and all the staff at SIA who were supportive of this idea for the workshop. And that's the end of what I had intended to share with you. So now I'd just like to open it up for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Lindsay. I want to say thanks for giving us a good overview of how to make an effective resume and cover letter together. So we have everyone on the on the webinar right now muted. So if you have any questions for her or comments, please put them into the chat, and we will, I guess, address them in order as they come in.
Hi, Corey.
I can see the chat, Corey. So
Okay.
Yeah, and I've actually changed everybody's status so they can unmute themselves if they have a question or comment.
Okay. Well, actually, can I start with a question for you? Well, everyone else just thinking. I guess, do you have an opinion on length for resume or cover letter? What's appropriate?
I for sure do. Yeah. And I would say 2 pages. That's my personal opinion. And my son, who's a recent graduate of U of S, so limited work history for sure. He has a pretty good resume on 1 page, and it is a little bit of a matter of how you lay it out. I did, there was, and it escapes me who amongst the 4 people that I talked to, but one of them was like, yeah, they wanted to see 2 pages. They felt that if it was 1 page, it was too skinny and not meaty enough. Yeah. But when I've had the chance to read resumes, and I read every resume that was ever submitted to me. If 50 people applied for the job, I read all 50 resumes. And so, but I probably didn't read the 3rd page as much as I would have read the 1st or the 2nd page, just because at that point it's too long. Yeah. Good question.
Thank you.
How long is your resume, Corey?
I've taken that advice to bring it down to 2 and then have the last page for references upon request.
Yeah.
But I found cover letters, sometimes you warp it to that specific position or company. So still a brief 1-pager, but it means sometimes it's brief, sometimes it's a little more, couple paragraphs in there.
Yeah, and you did ask about cover letters, but I didn't answer your question. I probably wouldn't want to see a cover letter that was longer than a page. Yeah, yeah. I don't think you were like you need to be thoughtful to make it shorter. And so then if it's too long, I'm thinking, well, you didn't take the time to make it relevant and to the point. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'll make up my own question. So when in preparing for this, I think it was maybe and we did a little bit of a dry run when I did this a month ago. I think maybe it was Annette that had asked me, like, what are some of the faux pas that you've seen? And I would say number one for faux pas that kind of stands out is particularly in a cover letter when it says, "Dear hiring manager, I am really looking, please accept the attached resume as an application for this job at this organization," but that's not the organization that you sent it to. And so, that I think, well, actually you were applying at Farm Credit, but you're talking about Nutrien as applying for a job at Nutrien in this letter. Don't do that. That's that's probably not going to win you any points. Yeah. And I would say, that it isn't up to date. Uh, to my earlier point about the degree not being indicated correctly, and also maybe that there's just too much work experience, too much description, or that the language they use would only be understood by their peers, not understood by somebody, that's kind of from outside of the organization. Yeah. Any other questions anybody wants to ask? Hmm.
There, there are two questions in the chat.
Okay, I
Um,
that I don't see then.
okay, do you want me
Sorry.
just to read them?
Oh,
Just read
yeah.
out.
Okay.
Sure. So our first one is, please, where can I have a template to make my resume look like 2 pages in a Word document? Is there a site out there? Is there any help out there to help get it more concise?
Yeah, I would okay, so I'm gonna go back to sharing. Can I just do that quickly? If I can figure that out. So I'm gonna share that screen. Nope. Hold on. I would maybe you can see it. I would this is the website, and I'll put it in the chat if I really can figure that out. I would Google University of Saskatchewan Career Services. And there are resume guides in here, a CV guide, which is a particular sort of academic resume, a cover letter guide. That would be the first place that I would go. Yeah. I think in terms of keeping it in 2 pages, it's a little bit about structure, but it's also about the words you use, and be concise. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. We've got a few more questions coming in now. People have had a second to think, but
Okay.
how long would you keep summer student experience on your resume?
That's a really good question, Jessica. Um like I don't know. I wouldn't think I would think in general, jobs that I've had more than 5 or 6 years ago, I should maybe just list. And so if I'm 22 when I graduate from university, by the time I hit 30, I probably don't need to be talking about my summer student jobs anymore. Yeah. Yeah. It is even when in an interview process, we had a particular format we used at Farm Credit Canada, and we'd ask people, okay, tell us about a time when you did blah, you demonstrated this skill. If they told us about something that happened 5 years ago, that was actually kind of worth a little bit less than if they said, okay, well, 2 months ago I did X and Y. So your more recent experience is always more applicable to what you're talking about. So yeah, 5, 6 years is probably the outside of that. Yeah.
Excellent. We have a question about a web page where we can find the equivalency of degrees from other countries, and you had mentioned that earlier.
So what I talked about, it's called World Education Services, and it's actually a service that Valerie Pearson could probably provide you with a little bit more information on that one. But it's a service to have your education um, credited. I don't that's maybe not the right word. So it's not. I don't think it would be um, good enough to go to a website and say, okay, well, I have a degree from the University of Berlin. I don't know. I just thought of that off the top of my head, and that equals this. This service, which I'm assume does it for a fee, is actually looking at your transcripts and the degree and the courses that you took as part of your degree and saying and making an assessment of what that's equivalent to. So it's not as simple as just looking it up on the website. Yeah. But if you want more information about that, I would suggest that you talk to Valerie Pearson. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And a fourth question, if you're suggesting 2 pages, how many bullet points do you recommend per job experience in event that there are a lot of experiences to put on that resume?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. And I would probably I'd be sort of in the 4, 5, or 6 for my most recent experience, and the number of bullets would probably lessen the longer ago I had that position. So that would be my kind of rule of thumb. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. One cover letter question here. Um, who do you address the cover letter to, i.e., to whom it may concern, to hiring manager, or is it better to find the actual name of the hiring manager?
I would take option C. If I could find out the name of the actual hiring manager, I would absolutely, I would try and make the effort to do that. Yeah. And I and even if you have the opportunity to go talk to the hiring manager, either for coffee, over the phone, that um if when I'm looking at a bunch of resumes and somebody has tried to reach out to me, they've actually tried to find out who I was and then took the effort to phone Farm Credit Reception and say, "Can I talk to Lindsay Folk?" Like that, to me, that shows effort that is going to make you stand out from others for sure. Yeah. So hopefully that kind of answers your question, Victoria.
Thank you. We don't have any questions quite yet, but I'm sure there'll be a few more once people have a chance to think or something comes to their mind.
Sure. I'll just maybe summarize what I think I've tried to say over the last 45 minutes is do research, take your time, be thoughtful, think about how it relates to the specific job that you're applying for, edit, get somebody else to review it. I think if you follow those kind of 3 or 4 steps, you'll have a really, really good product. And then what you're trying to do is to get to that next step, and then you can actually sell yourself in person. If you get an interview, then you have a chance to actually relate and share your experiences in person. But at the beginning, all you got is, essentially a piece of paper to sell yourself. Yeah.
Well, that's very good advice. And I also want to add there are lots of opportunities out there. I in with the workforce, the way it looks for any of the younger agrologists, anybody who's got some experience, I think there's great opportunities there. It's kind of you're steering the ship for yourself, if, so to speak.
Yeah, and I it's a completely different job market than when I graduated from university in 1988, where I think most of my class got a job, but no, they didn't have 3 or 4 to choose from, and there was just kind of enough to go around. And it is a different job market right now. Um, but that being said, you still want to make that good first impression, even though I'm an educated person and I've got good work experience. Why wouldn't I still want my resume to reflect my good professionalism thing that I've got going on? Well, why wouldn't I want that to, take the time to do that? And it's not a tremendous amount of time, but it does need to be thoughtful. Yeah. Even though the job market is quite good for new grads. Yeah.
Excellent. We have one question here at the bottom from Nathan Hebert. Should you emphasize relevant job experience over other experience, i.e., currently work as both an independent agronomist and a curling ice technician, would they be equal?
Well, I mean, if you're applying for a job in the agriculture industry, then I would probably spend more real estate on your resume about the types of responsibilities and achievements that you've had as an independent agronomist. But I actually would recommend that you're a curling ice technician. And to me, um, I want to hire interesting people. And so I'm like, wow, know any curling ice technicians? And I don't know anything about that. And and how I would, if I was hiring you or interviewing Nathan, I'd want you to tell me, like, how do you balance both of those responsibility, and what caused you to take on this other interest, and clearly it requires some skill and knowledge, and those types of things. So I wouldn't don't ignore, because a curling ice technician has nothing to do with being an agronomist for a, you know, a seed company or something like that. I think it adds to the dimension of you. So I absolutely would include it. I spend more time talking about what your agronomist activities are. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
Excellent. Thanks, Lindsay. Um, just going to give a little more time if there's any other uh, questions, whether they want to put them in the chat or ask. Um, I'm trying to think of something and my mind is blank. I'm just going to see if I can.
Yeah, and I this is something that Valerie and our committee has heard me talk about before, because I I think sometimes when I look at resumes, I think, "Hmm, just a little bit more time could have made this pretty good." Yeah, and so that would be one of the messages I like to harp on for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I'm having a hard time thinking of anything else to ask you off the top of my
All
head.
good. Yeah. Yeah. No, and if there are questions that come out afterwards, get back to SIA, and they can funnel them my way, and I'd be happy to answer them. Yeah. But a little bit of Googling, and the USask site they have really excellent resources for sure. Yeah.
Okay. I've got two actually that just came in last second here. Um, what is the chance that one can get a job in agronomy after testing out other job opportunities in a different field?
I don't that I couldn't comment on what the chances are. I mean, one, but I will say, as part of the admissions and registration committee, so maybe I'll just talk about that briefly. When you apply to become an articling agrologist, when you've done all your articling milestones and tasks, you apply to become a professional agrologist. One of the things that we talk about is scopes of practice, and that paying attention to what your scope of practice is, that it actually aligns somewhat with my education and my experience. And so my degree, I have what was in 1988 was a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, agricultural economics. And so if I were tomorrow to go apply for a job at BASF as an agronomist, my scope of practice, and imagine they hired me for some reason, my scope of practice agronomy would not actually match my would not line up with my experience and my education. And so when there's a gap, and sometimes that happens, employers, particularly in agronomy, hire agribusiness majors to do agronomy things, then you got to close that gap with education. And so I can't comment on what the chances would be, in terms of getting a job in agronomy, if my scope or my minor was in something else. But if that's something that interests you, you might as well start thinking about how you're going to close that gap in education now, because you will have one. And to work in one scope, which isn't supported by your work experience in another, then that isn't kind of in alignment with what we would say a professional agrologist should be doing. And I'm going to more on that topic. You should talk to Valerie. Yeah.
Well, those are excellent points about working in a field and having the competencies in there for sure.
Correct.
So, but
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
one question from Shannon. Thanks, Shannon, for your comments this afternoon. Do we like a mission statement or objective?
Yeah, I'm kind of 50-50 on them. Like I don't think it's necessary. Um, sometimes you do see I'm a young professional wanting to work in the field of in a vibrant industry such as agriculture. I'm just totally making this up. And I in some ways that goes without saying if you're applying for a job. I I'm not sure. I don't think it detracts from it. I don't think it adds a whole bunch, but if you wanted to use that as a little bit of personality in your resume, have at her. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent, thanks.
And yes, thank you, Shannon, for your participation.
So, okay, I'm gonna give it a little bit longer in case anyone has had any questions or comments come to their mind. I'm assuming, Lindsay, you've seen hundreds of resumes over your working career and cover letters.
A lot of people. Like, and I was a hiring manager on several occasions, and at Farm Credit Canada, it was always our practice to have a couple people on a panel. So I'd be on somebody else's panel that they were the hiring manager for. And and we review a lot of packages and resumes as part of the admissions and registration committee. And one thing I've learned that I probably didn't realize until I was part of this committee is how many new articling agrologists and professional agrologists there are all the time. And our committee meets, I don't know, every 6 to 8 weeks, I think, and there'll be 50 people applying for some sort of change in status. So yeah, I have looked at lots, yeah.
Perfect. I've just
Um,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Yeah.
Just Shannon there just commenting saying I've always kind of used them as an introduction or preview. Wasn't sure if that was just an old school mentality or not.
Yeah. I I don't know if it's old school. I think it's more a preference thing than a old school, new school thing. So yeah, like I said before, I think it neither detracts or it's a must. So yeah, it's a preference thing. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna go to one of Shannon's questions and I'll go back to Randy's there. But do you ever want to edit some candidates' resumes and send them back and say, here, this will be more helpful in your future? Um, or is that just her?
For for sure, and there have been times it as part of the admissions and registrations committee that I've asked Valerie and her team to go back and have somebody change their resume, update it, that what they were, and I'll use education as an example. They didn't do it to mislead us, but it wasn't correct, and so for the purpose that they might use that resume for another purpose, my ask was, get them to go back and make sure that it reads correctly. Yeah. Yeah. And I have a good red pen of editing when I want to. I don't use it as much anymore now that I'm retired, but
Randy brings up a good question here, and thank you for that, Randy. What do you believe the value of recruiters in the whole process?
yeah, I don't know. I've not had much experience. I have zero experience personally using a recruitment service. I and when I was at Farm Credit, for the most part, we, for most of our sort of entry or mid-level jobs, we had sufficient applicants. There were some times that I think as an organization, we used a recruiting, or I can't exactly think of another word for it, but if it was a little bit of a higher level or an executive job, but yeah, I don't have a lot of experience, Randy, sorry.
Oh, excellent. And that's a good point because I mean, I've had recruiters call me when I was in school, and it was varying success, good and bad, I guess, depending. But
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
Simi, I just want to say there in the comment that I think reaching out to Valerie would be the best way to address the to address or deal with the gaps that you had mentioned there. And Valerie
Thanks, Valerie.
responded,
Mhm.
and we could find her contact information on the website, or it can be sent to you as well.
Yeah, thank you.
But with that, I will just leave it open for a little bit longer. We're getting to the end of our time, and I know everybody has a busy afternoon ahead of themselves. I'll give it a few more seconds, and we'll probably close it out here. Okay, well, with that, I do want to thank everybody for listening in today, for their participation, and I hope everybody got a little bit of information out of the webinar or out of the workshop from Lindsay. I want to give a big thank you to Lindsay for her time and effort for putting together a presentation and giving us some very good information on how to make effective resumes and cover letters. And as I mentioned before, as young agrologists, there's a lot of opportunities and jobs out there. So I think if we just go out there and kind of get them or work towards them, I think there's great careers to be had in agriculture for a number of individuals.
Absolutely. Yeah, for
So
sure.
with that, I
Mm.
want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lindsay. I want everyone to enjoy their afternoon, and hopefully you can tune in to another SIA noon webinar that we have. So thanks very much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Corey.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Yeah.